Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. Hi, Lorraine. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Christine. I'm so excited to be here. What has it taken us, like 6 months?
Yeah, I think so. And I am so excited to have you because today we are going to talk about parenting with different diagnoses in the parents. So I think a lot of times we talk about when we have kids that have special needs or have different diagnoses, and there's quite a bit of conversation around that. But I don't think there's enough conversation around when us parents have different diagnoses, mental health issues or disabilities, different abilities, those kinds of things. And so today we're going to talk about your experience with parenting with ADHD and BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. So let's give a brief kind of like explanation for people who don't know what it is, because we're trying to like spread awareness. And so really, like, borderline personality disorder, for short, we call it BPD. So we're going to reference BPD throughout the podcast just to make it easier. And really that is, a diagnosis where people can have trouble with emotional regulation, regulating their emotions, feeling things in big ways, kind of sometimes difficulties with relationship dynamics, managing relationships, things like that. I mean, this is like a very basic explanation. However, similar to ADHD, everyone is different, right? When everyone has a diagnosis of BPD and ADHD, it shows up differently for them in their lives. ADHD is the same, so that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it shows up really different for people. Everyone can have different types. So do you want to just share with us briefly, how do you define your diagnoses? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, it's not a Google search. Everyone's experience is different. So what my BPD and ADHD are not going to be similar to someone else's.
Right.
I actually was first diagnosed with BPD postpartum. And then in March of this year, I received my ADHD diagnosis. So for me, the BPD is and always has been the emotional aspect, the relationships, whether that was work, intimate, friendships, those I struggled with. And I mean, my resume is about 6 pages long.
Right. Yeah.
My husband teases me because he interviews for a living and he's like, "You're my nightmare."
Right.
But it was so hard. And I grew up not understanding why. It felt easier for other people. Like emotions, the smallest thing would set me off. And it would just be like, why am I so angry? Why am I crying in the corner? And I think it's really hard because they immediately said depression. They immediately said anxiety. Yeah. And I don't think I don't have those. I don't think those started the journey. But it can develop and it can snowball. And I think my perinatal and my pregnancy and then becoming a mom during COVID all kind of accumulated, and they were like, oh, because my thing has always been, I don't mind labels in the sense of knowing myself.
Yeah.
Because I can't get supports and I can't do what's best for me if I don't know what that is. So I had my diagnosis. I went through postpartum depression and I went to my doctor and I said, something still doesn't feel right. I'm back on my meds. Postpartum is being supported. I still feel like there's a missing puzzle. And we had started that. We actually started the ADHD diagnosis prior to getting pregnant. And then it kind of got put on pause.
Right.
So I had a full psychiatric workup, which I hadn't had since I was like 11.
Right.
And they came back with BPD. And it was funny when they did it because the only context I had was a TV show at the time that I was obsessed with, which was Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Hmm.
And the character in there was diagnosed. And the more I watched it, I was like, she is my spirit animal. So I
Right.
laughed when they gave me the diagnosis because I said, oh, now the pieces fall into place. And then I was spending time with someone last year who has had ADHD for a very long time and was saying, you're missing another puzzle piece
Mm.
because like I can see it clear as day.
Right.
And I wasn't seeing it. And then there were things, and I was like, that's ADHD? That's ADHD? And then I got that diagnosis. And my joke is alphabet soup. If I went through, it's BPD, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, and
Yep.
then ADHD is in there. Yeah, I don't have the list, but there's a lot.
Fair.
And I think it's just everybody's going to have a different journey.
Hmm.
For me, it's the emotions. And when the ADHD is an issue, it is the focus and the motivation. And I tend to be a multitasker. So it's trying to do 12 things at once, but nothing actually gets done.
Yes.
And that was something I never noticed. I was just like, I'm so busy. I'm so busy, but never actually noticed that nothing got done being busy.
Right. Right. And so what's so interesting is that there is a lot of crossover between BPD and ADHD, especially in that emotion regulation piece, right?
Mhm.
It's really similar. And I've actually had a lot of clients who've been misdiagnosed with BPD and actually then got a diagnosis of ADHD later on in life. I think what also contributes to that is that in the ADHD diagnosis, there's still a lot of gender bias where like typically it's seen as like a young boy's issue. And so if you're, I know in my case, like a young girl who I wasn't bouncing off the walls in the classroom and physically, walking around and things like that, but I was disruptive by talking or, not paying attention or, struggling to get work done. But never offered support and never like I was just told just do it.
Were
Right.
you a chatty Cathy?
Oh
So
yes.
that was the term all my teachers had for me. I can guarantee you my report card said, Lorraine's really good. She just needs to focus. She just needs to raise her hand. She just needs to stop talking out loud. And yeah,
Yes.
one of my teachers called me Chatty Cathy. And but you're
Sure.
right. It's little boys. They get, the stereotype of they're bouncing off the walls and they're aggressive and all these things.
Yep.
But if I look back now, the flags are all there. Like
Absolutely.
I was good at school. I could study, I could focus, but I didn't want to sit in a desk.
Yeah.
Like I sat on my desk. I'm sitting here right now, wrapped up like a pretzel.
Yep. Yep.
It's the sitting and the doing, but my brain was constantly going, and it was like this
Mhm.
is not the environment for us. So
Right.
hands-on has always worked, creative has always worked, but if you want to stick me in front of a desk, it's not going to happen.
No,
And school was a struggle because of that. My mom
exactly.
said go to post secondary because mature for my age, and we now know what that means.
Right. Yep. Oh, yes.
And I dropped out of Mac after 6 months,
Yeah.
and then I dropped out of Sheridan with a year to go, and then it was a struggle.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I so relate when you said like that kind of like always struggling but not knowing like why can't I get there? Why are other people doing this and I
Mhm.
can't? Like why? And that's now what I realize is okay, I got things done. Because I think that's the other problem is if people look at you and think, and no one can see me, but quote unquote, you're successful or you've done well. Like, yeah, I graduated university by the skin of my teeth, like just
Mhm.
barely. And it was such a struggle and I didn't enjoy it. And I don't feel like there's a lot of things I missed out on because I wasn't able to fully engage because I didn't know and what was going on. I didn't have the support. But that feeling of like, why is this so hard? Like everything feels so hard.
Yep. I still have days where I say I don't want to be me because I
Mm.
will do something and it's like I know better than that. Or an interaction someone takes in the wrong context where I thought I was very, appropriate and coming across, and all of a sudden they take it the wrong way. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be me today. And I say that to my
Mm-hmm.
husband a lot. I'll just have those days where I'm like, I'm being a bad wife, I'm being a bad mom. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be me today. And growing up, it was, why is it so easy for everybody?
Yes.
Why can everybody make friends and not feel alone in a group? Why can you hold a job and have a career? Why can you finish school and actually enjoy what you're doing? A 1 year course took me 2 years, and begging teachers. My mom went to the school and was like, she's at home. She can't get out of bed. Give me the paperwork. She will get it done. She just won't be in class.
Right.
And it was just every day was a struggle.
Yeah, I hear that. And I look back to like on my career before I went back to school in my 30s to, change my career path. But before that, because I wasn't in a place that I was like passionate about, I was paying the bills and I, was thankful for that. But I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, every like year and a half, I changed. Even if it was in the same company, I would apply for a different position or go to a different department. And I look back and I see that pattern from when I started working, like at 18, where it's like, okay, year and a half, like I'm good. Like I've reached my quota.
I never realized the cycle, and probably until my last retail position before I started a small business. And that was it. I would start a job. I would be so into it and love it. And I'd be, top dog. And they'd be like, you're on the roll for promotion or whatever. And within 6 months, it's like the rug came out from under me. I became a scapegoat for whatever drama was going on.
Mhm.
And all those things just fell off. And I was like, but you promised me this. And you said I was good. And now I'm not getting my end of the bargain.
Mhm.
And then it's just like, you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I had so many great experiences that ended like that. And it really, really sucks to look back because there were so many opportunities for careers. And I'm sitting here like, I'm in my mid 30s and I work an office job, just
Mm,
a day job, pays the
right.
bills, like you said. And I'm so thankful for that because
Right.
not everyone has that right now.
Yeah.
But there were just so many opportunities. And my husband's been with the same company for like 4 years, whereas I'm
Right.
sitting here just bouncing.
Right.
And it makes me hesitant to start jobs because I mean, it did before. But at this point, it's only been a couple months, but I have my good days and I have my bad days. That's
Yeah,
just how it works.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so, how do you feel that your symptoms and how they manifest for you, how do they show up in your parenting? How do they impact your parenting? What is that like for you?
It was very different. Once I got the diagnosis, I kind of noticed things in my parenting. I noticed when I can't regulate myself emotionally. I noticed, my focus. The biggest one, I'm sure you get this, overstimulation,
Oh, yes.
being
Yes.
touched out, sounds,
Yeah.
especially with the kids. They're playing, they're watching TV, they're listening to something. My son's biggest thing is imagination play, and I
Hmm.
don't know how to do it.
Same.
I don't know how to play, and I didn't think that was going to be a problem.
Thank you, Lorraine, for sharing that because I have a lot of guilt around that. And you're not here to alleviate my guilt, but I can so relate to that because I'm the same. I really struggle with play. I have their whole lives. And, like sitting down and playing board games with my kids is not something I do because I just cannot do it. I
Mm-hmm.
physically cannot do it. And then I feel guilty and like I'm not doing enough family time with my kids because I don't sit and play with them. And like singing songs and children's songs was like not my thing. I couldn't do it, and then I feel bad because like, my kids didn't get that from me. And then I felt bad because I loved that they went to daycare because they got that at daycare. Right. But like, oh, it there's that shame word, it should be me doing that. But I just couldn't. And then there's some days that part of me is like, yeah. And then they get other things from me, and they get the logical side, or they get, the side that talks to them honestly and openly and, whatever. And then they get the play and all that stuff from school and friends and whatever, which is great. But definitely a lot of guilt around that. The play piece.
It's weird because I was the kid who could imagination play. I'm an only child. My parents bought me a Playmobil dollhouse when I was younger, and I still have it. My mom actually took it out for him, and I could play with that for hours.
Me too.
Hours. And now it's like we have PJ Masks, we have Gabby's Dollhouse, we have Paw Patrol, we have Bluey, and these are all the shows we watch. So I know these characters and I know the storyline, and I just sit there and stare at him. But I am also the parent who can snuggle up and watch a Disney movie. And when he needs those quiet times, whereas my husband gets on the floor and plays, and I'll make every excuse in the book. Well, daddy's in the bathroom. When daddy gets out, he'll play with you. Daddy's making dinner. And he's like, Daddy, are you done yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like,
I want to play.
He's like, just play with him. And I'm like, I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get on the floor and I'll start, and then I'm just like, okay. And like, my husband does the voices and everything. He's fantastic.
Right.
But now singing we do.
Yes.
And I have tons of playlists for parents, if you're listening, that are not nursery rhymes. You're welcome.
Yes.
But that's always been my passion, is music. So
Same.
When he sings in the car, it literally like makes my heart happy. But yeah, it's just the guilt of that when it started, when he's at that age now where he wants to play from sun up to sundown.
Right.
And it's like, Mommy can't do it, buddy. And he doesn't get it. And the only thing I have found that helps, after watching a couple TikToks, of course, was noise canceling headphones while I'm playing.
Smart.
I can hear him. I can interact.
Yeah.
But either I have a playlist or I'm listening to something on Audible, and that has helped. Yeah. But I still don't have the play piece. I can get regulated enough to sit with you.
Yes.
But the play piece is not there. And it's so weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up working with kids. I was that kid.
Yep.
And I feel so guilty that I can't do that sometimes. Like, I will sit on the couch and my husband's on the floor, and I'm just like, okay, Mommy can build the toys, but Mommy can't play with the toys.
Right. Right.
And I don't get it.
Right. And it is one of those things. It's like how our brain is wired differently. And it's like, the why, searching for the why. It's, well, we're neurodivergent. We're different. Like, our brain is wired differently. And so, we have these different characteristics. But what I also love is that you were like, I figured it out for the most part of, okay, get the noise canceling headphones, put on music or, an audiobook, whatever works for you. I think that's a big key. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, right? Is like getting to know ourselves, learning our symptoms, especially things like ADHD and BPD, where it's going to show up differently in everyone. And so getting to know your own symptoms, what are your sensitivities, what, really bothers you, and then what do you need to do to manage that so you can show up in the best way you can for your kid. It doesn't mean you're going to start playing, all the imagination games with your kid, but it means, like you said, you can at least sit with him and be present with him in a way that you can connect with him, which is really important, because there are times where I'm rubbing my ear because I get like my ears get physically sore with all the noise in my house. And like a lot of other people don't understand like how deeply it affects me. And so sometimes I just got to check out, like I got to leave the room. I got to go outside. I got to go to my room alone. I have to be away from the stimulus, and because it physically hurts me. I feel physically uncomfortable, like I'm crawling out of my skin, right? But then there's also the like, well, you're a mom, you have to put up with it, or you got to deal with it. And it's like, but if I stay in this environment, like I'm gonna flip out. So yeah, I have to remove myself. Now I know and understand why, and so I can do that for the most part now guilt-free, because I'm like, I know that if I take this time out, I can come back. as opposed to like wanting to run away and never wanting to come back.
I don't have that luxury. We live in a basement apartment.
Mm,
So I can't go in my room. I can close the door. Nine
right.
times out of 10, that means I'm unconscious.
Right. You're
The
sleeping.
baby naps, I nap. I say the
Yes,
baby, he's 3.
of course.
Um, but it is that. It's I've been touched out.
Mm,
When we have the biggest struggle is bedtime. And
yeah.
so sometimes it's like he's out like a light. Other nights it takes us 2 to 3 hours.
Right.
And he just won't stop. And I'm just trying to sit there and I'm like, okay, let's be quiet. And he's going, last night was so funny. He went, Mom, Mommy, Mom. And I was trying to ignore him.
Hmm.
He takes a pause and he goes, Lorraine. And I started howling because I was like, I can't
Yeah.
ignore that. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what?
Yes. Oh my God. I love it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just have to laugh or we'll cry, right?
And he knows. He gets to that point where he's like, if I can make you laugh, you'll pay attention to me.
Of course.
Um, but yeah, it is that point. Like you just get to it and it's like, I can't do it, but I also can't react.
Yeah, it's
It's
hard.
it's that hard part of like, I don't want to make it worse,
Yeah.
but I just, and it's that guilt. Like, I don't want to snuggle with you right now. I don't want to interact with you right now.
Yeah.
I would like to be the amount of times I have taken a nap and the mom guilt has kicked in
Hmm.
is I endless.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where he knows now. Like he'll say, "Are you gonna go to sleep?"
Yeah.
If one time he looked at me and he said, Are you gonna go to sleep?" See, I'm
Mm.
always gonna have a nap. He says, "Okay, I'll play quietly."
Oh,
And it was sweet, but at the same time, I was like, "Oh, he is so used to this.
right.
This has become regular." And like, I don't want him to grow up being the kid who was like, my mom wasn't around. I was sleeping all the
Mhm.
time. And that's a guilt one too. Like that's a big one.
Right. And I'm wondering, this is my therapist part coming out. I can't help it, but can that become a positive? I'm wondering. And it might not be, right? I'm not here, like I am not about, um, toxic positivity and like, oh, it's okay, right? Because for you, that doesn't feel okay.
Mhm.
I'm also wondering though, can it become a positive where your son understands when people have stuff going on? Like when mommy's overstimulated, she needs quiet in the house. And so I know how to do that. I know how to regulate myself to be quiet because I'm living I'm in a family and in a household where there's multiple people. We take each other into account. We try to keep the noise down if someone's napping, et cetera, et cetera. Can that be a positive and something for him to learn in a positive way, to be kind to people and to understand that people go through things and we can't always be like happy and cheerful and do all the things?
Yeah, no, I think it is like he understands if my husband sleeps in on the weekend because we take turns.
Yep.
He'll be like talking, getting excited about a TV show. I'll be like, Daddy's asleep, and he'll go, okay, shh, like we gotta be quiet. So he gets it. It's the guilt of like, my husband goes from sun up to sundown with him, and I'm like, can I go on a 3 hour nap? And he's never guilted me. He's never said no. Is sometimes I have to train my brain to be like, you're taking a nap so you can be present later. And it's the
Yes.
hardest is when I don't know why I'm tired. I could be up, I could have eaten breakfast, I could have had a coffee, and all of a sudden my body's like, no, we want to be unconscious. And when I started the new job, that was a big one because I finished at 3 and I would come home and crash until we had to go get him at daycare. And I
Hmm.
could not figure out. I was like, is it the meds not working? Is it? And then
Right.
a friend said, well, you're on your phone, you've got a computer, you're answering phones, and you're doing paperwork. What if you just have a quiet drive on the way home?
Mm.
Because I was calling my husband and talking, trying not to fall asleep or
Yep.
blasting the music or something. And she, suggested try having a quiet drive. And
Mm.
I did it one day and I still had to sleep,
Yep.
but it made me realize that that was my way of basically sensory deprivation. I didn't need to sleep.
Yeah.
I needed my weighted blanket. I needed my eye mask, and I just needed to rest. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is the difference between sleep and rest.
Hmm.
And I'm instilling that in my son is if you don't want to sleep, like have a full nap, then we're just going to rest. We're just going to have a quiet time. We're just going to lights off. We'll read some books. It's the biggest difference because
Yes.
sometimes I would get up and be like, I tried to sleep and I didn't, and I feel like garbage.
Oh my God. Yes.
And sometimes you have to give yourself the grace to be like, I'm just going to lie here and enjoy the dark and get up when I want.
Yes. Yeah. And that's such a positive thing, I think, for your son to learn and grow up with, because especially in North America, we don't value rest like I think we need to. And then we
Mm-hmm.
see the effects of that, coming out in high levels of anxiety and burnout and all the things. Rest is critical for our overall well-being, right?
And
And so,
sleep has always been a struggle. I almost didn't get through high school because I would sleep. I'd go to like one class, call my mom, she'd come and get me, and I'd sleep for the rest of the day. It's
right.
always been a struggle. And then I had insomnia. So I've been on every sleep medication. I had sleep studies done, things like that. So it's always been a struggle, but it's also, it helps. And it gets to the point where, like, if I have a bad night's sleep, stay
Mhm.
out of my way. I'm
Yes.
cranky. I'm tired. I'm overstimulated. It does not matter if the medication wants to work that day, it's not going to.
Yes.
And
I
it's that, like, I didn't have a good sleep, so I'm gonna have a nap. But even days where I have, like, 8 hour sleep, still want to have a nap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually am able to notice that more now since getting my diagnosis and starting medication last year, so 2021,
Mhm.
that now I see how tired I was during the day. Again, even if I had 10 hours of sleep, just the fatigue that was there constantly. And now that I have my medication where I can make it, to the evening time without, wanting to curl up and fall asleep, um, was really eye-opening. Like, wow. And how that's like naturally, just for a lot of us with ADHD, that's naturally how we are and how our brain works, with like that fatigue and that tiredness is there, right? And our brain is running like a trillion miles a minute, right? So I think that contributes to it, right?
And I think that's the one thing people don't understand about ADHD is the stereotype is we have squirrel brain. We are
Yeah,
constantly on the go. So we should be full of energy.
right.
But that energy depletes so
So fast.
fast.
Yeah.
It's social interactions, emotional interactions, physical interactions. And again, that's the why is it so easy for everyone else? Because my husband can get up at 7 a.m. and
Yeah.
he can go until we go to bed. Whereas I'm like, it's 2 in the afternoon. Can I go to sleep? The baby's
Yeah.
asleep. And then he doesn't wake me up until I get up.
Right.
Or when I was younger, why can all my friends go out and party and I need to sleep for 13 hours and
Right.
be, a doctor's puzzle because sleep was just either I had so much of it
Yeah.
or I had none of it because I went through bouts of insomnia too. Like
Yeah.
I'd sleep for 2 weeks and then I wouldn't sleep for a month. And I had insomnia when I was pregnant. It was the worst. Um,
Yes.
but sleep is crucial to my mental health as a whole. Like if I
Absolutely.
don't get it, it's a nightmare. It does not matter how many tools are in my back pocket. I am basically defenseless against my brain when that
Right.
happens.
Right. And so what was that like for you with a newborn? How did you deal with that?
I would not have survived without the help of my husband and family.
Yes.
Because having these things and knowing the depression and the anxiety, we sat down when I was pregnant and we
Yeah.
said, okay, we need a plan because,
Yes.
9 times out of 10, depression is going to turn to postpartum. So
Mhm.
we had a plan and you think and you
Right.
don't know. It does not matter until you're in the thick of it. You have
Hmm.
no idea what's coming for you. And, my husband got up at night and would let me sleep and our son did not sleep. Like,
Mm.
I don't know what it was. He did not sleep, but he didn't want to eat. He needed to be held and rocked to
Mhm.
sleep. And there were those nights where, like, in the morning, my husband was like, I was going to toss him out a window, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And the mom guilt was like, you should be doing your part. You should be tired. But I was with him all day and
Yeah.
would be like napping when he naps, but then like, then the house isn't clean and you're not doing things.
Yeah.
But the postpartum was like, I don't want to be around this screaming child who will not sleep.
Absolutely.
Uh, it would get to the point where he would go to work. My mom would show up and take him to her house for the day.
Right.
Um, we got to bottle feed for a variety of reasons. So that was freedom to me. There was guilt
Yeah.
there, but it was the freedom to get the assistance I needed. But it was really hard to want to just sleep when I
Yeah.
know there's this human who relies
Yeah.
on me, that
Yeah.
I wanted to be here. I
Yes.
always wanted to be a mom,
Yeah.
and my pregnancy didn't go to plan. And now I felt like, postpartum wasn't going to plan. And then COVID kicks in,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's still tough. If he doesn't sleep, we don't sleep, and we still
Right.
take turns. I got up with him last night, you get up with him tonight, and then it's,
Yeah.
well, he has to get up with him so I can take him to daycare the next day,
Right.
because he doesn't want me to be sleepy behind the wheel.
Right. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, all those things, like you said, have massive impacts on your mental health. And what I love in that, again, the reason why it's so important to get to know ourselves and our symptoms is, okay, so we know that this is going to be tough. Let's make a plan. Right. And like you said, we don't know, especially with a newborn, like we don't know what it's like until we're in the thick of it. But at least having that conversation, getting those supports in place, whatever that looks like for you and your family, of like, how do we take care of me too? Right?
Mhm.
It's not just about taking care of the baby. It's about taking care of the birthing person, about taking care of the whole family, right? How do we survive this really difficult period of time, right? And so I think that is really, really crucial, something that I didn't do because I had no idea of any of my diagnoses or symptoms. And, I just, whatever, just thought I was the way I was. And then all was okay until I had my third kid. And then shit hit the fan and, went downhill pretty quick. And so I didn't have a plan for support. I didn't know what to ask for, who to go to, or what to do, right? And so I think that can be super, super helpful of having that, at least that idea of like, how do I get enough sleep? How do I get support? How do I get food in my belly? How do I get, whatever I need, right? Those are important things.
And I don't think any of us realized what it was going to be like, because the plan was like, grandma will come over for like an hour a day so you can have a shower and you get some time to yourself and you can have a nap. And I was like, okay, great. And it
Yeah.
was like, no, for the first month, my husband was back to work. It was every day, like putting him in the car seat, get him out of my sight. I can't do this. And
Yes.
going back to bed until like 6 o'clock when he came home, and he would
Mhm.
come in and be full dad duty. And I would just be like, I'm done. I've
Right.
slept all day. Why am I done?
Mm.
And it was, again, it's that mom guilt. Like, I missed out on the first 6 months of his life, I tell myself, because I did. And then COVID kicked in. The biggest thing about the BPD was, once that was under control, then the ADHD spiked. And I could see the differences. And it's not just forgetfulness, like, can't find my car keys. My husband searches my purse and find them. I
Mhm.
have been searching my purse for an hour. Where
Yeah.
did you find them?
Yeah.
It's right in my hand. Where is it? People joke, I'm on my phone, but I don't know where it is.
Yes. Yep.
But that is legit what it feels like. You don't know where
Absolutely.
something is, and it's in your hand.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And, I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in my kids who have ADHD, of literally like the thing is in front of you, let's say on the counter, you're looking for something, it's in front of you, but you don't see it. It's like this like blindness. And that is part of ADHD, right? And so it's extremely frustrating, right? And
Yeah.
again, I think these little things, like, people don't understand how they really do impact our day to day. And when you're constantly searching for things, or you got to leave the door with a kid and a baby, and they're just settled in their car seat, and you're trying to find the keys, or you're trying to find the thing that you need, and you're delayed 10 minutes, like, that's a big deal when you have a little one, right?
Yeah.
Or everyone's waiting on you in the car, whatever that looks like, right?
And then on the flip side, like you just mentioned, like now that I have my diagnoses, I see the flags that were missed. And that is the hardest thing right now is trying not to treat him like I am a therapist. I'm not
Right.
an OT.
Right.
I'm not a behavioral therapist. I am
Yeah.
his mom.
Yeah.
And I still have days where I'm like, I'm going to pass everything down to him. And I have those guilty
Mhm.
moments. And then my husband says, but you're the best person to do this for him because who else is going to understand? And that's when I get into those moments of like, he's having, a meltdown. And I just sit, get to his level and I just say, do you want a hug? Do you just
Mhm.
want to, I try and get him to use his words as much as possible. Like he'll just say, I'm upset. And he's like, why are you upset?
Mhm.
And, I can see you're angry. But then there's those times where he's upset and then I'm upset and then he's throwing things. And now I'm upset because he threw a bowl and smashed it and we're setting
Mhm.
each other off.
Yes.
So it's not perfect, but I've had those moments where I'm like, is he free or is this ADHD? Because there are sensory issues. He does not like tags in his clothing. He does
Right.
not like food textures like me. He has his safe foods. He has the insomnia sleep issues.
Yes.
So I see those things and it's like, do I make a doctor's appointment? Or are they just going to say he's a three-nager? Because the terrible
Right.
twos didn't happen. The
No.
three-nager hit this kid like a truck.
Yeah.
Um, and
Same with mine.
it's so hard because I also don't want to focus on those things. I want to support him,
Mhm.
but I don't want to be so overprotective and pushing that he doesn't get to experience his childhood the way he wants. I
Right.
don't want to wrap him in this ADHD bubble. I want to support him and I want him to know that like he is smart, he is kind, he is all these things. And what I say to him is, he tends to go, I'm being bad. I'm sorry for being bad. And I
Mm.
change the language and say, we're not being bad. We're struggling to listen. We're
Yes.
having a hard time listening. And mommy has that too, or daddy has that too.
Yeah.
We're very, I appreciate you saying sorry, but you're not bad. And I constantly have to drill that into him.
Yeah.
The language he hears is, you're being bad. You're being bad.
Yeah.
It's hard because that is when the light bulb goes off for him, which is the hardest thing to watch because he will be mid meltdown.
Mm.
And it's like trying to get his coat and boots on have been a
Yes.
huge fight lately. And he will kick and scream. And eventually my husband just carries him to the car, sans coat, sans boots.
Yeah.
I believe in natural consequences.
Right.
So, you don't want to go out without your boots. Okay, go. Oh, you stepped in snow and now you want your boots.
Right.
And it's one of those things where like he will just be in the midst of screaming. And we get to that point where it's like, it has slipped once or twice. You're being bad. We
Of
don't
course.
like this. This isn't good behavior. And he
Yeah.
stops, takes him about 10 minutes, and then he goes, I'm sorry for being bad. And
Mm.
that's when I have to change the language and remind myself, we're sorry we said that.
Right.
That's not what we mean. And this is the behavior.
Hmm.
But then again, we can set each other off. It's not perfect. It's that
Yeah.
struggle of I see the things in me,
Yeah.
in you.
Yeah.
And because my husband is neurotypical,
Yeah.
he doesn't see those things as much. He couldn't sleep one night and he came out and kept pulling on his pajama shirt.
Mm.
And I finally realized it was a tag. I cut the tag and he went back to bed.
Yeah.
And my husband just looked at me and I was like, it's a tag.
Yeah. I
And
understand.
right. And he
Yeah.
said, you're actually going to have to help me guide this because I don't understand any of this. Like I've seen when we go out in public now that he covers his ears.
Yep.
He wants his tablet and he wants to wear like a set of earmuffs. We did that at breakfast the other day.
Yeah. Yep.
He wants his tablet, but he also wants a TV on. He wants constant stimulus, all these things. But that's also a 3.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's hard to see the differences and not panic.
Right.
It's I want the supports. I go but I'm also working on myself. So I'm learning how to do that with me, but also now is it like I'm gonna focus on that, and how do I do that, and how do we not set each other off
Yes.
doing that together? And then the guilt is I did this to him,
Oh,
and it's really hard because a lot of this is hereditary. It
right.
is.
Yeah.
So it is hard that if he struggles down the line, he's going to blame me. There's
Mm.
just these are the things that just run through
It
your
goes
head
through
when
your
you
head.
realize that you're like, okay, everything I have is hereditary.
Yeah.
I apologize in advance.
Yeah.
But you were, and it's what my mom does every time I got a new diagnosis. She cried and said, I'm sorry I did this to you. And especially when they would say, it's caused by traumatic, they say BPD is caused by traumatic experience after traumatic experience, and it just kind of snowballs
Yeah.
into this emotional dysregulation. And she took that to heart because, yes, I didn't have the easiest childhood growing up, and there were a lot of traumatic experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And she blames herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so hard trying to explain to her that no, my brain is wired differently.
Mm-hmm.
Things happened, which accumulated in time, and this was the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not your sole fault. And I feel like at some point, I'm going to be the exact same way. He's going to get his diagnosis and be like, it's mommy's fault. So sorry. I don't know what else to do.
And can you apply what you say to your mom to yourself?
I think I will at some point. I think the other hard part is noticing all these things and the people who don't.
Yeah.
So he's having a sensory moment and people are just like, why is he crying? Why is he screaming?
Yeah.
Why is he and I'm like, because he's having a sensory moment. We
Mm-hmm.
tried to take him to Festival of Friends in the summer
Mm-hmm.
and full meltdown, just screaming and crying, couldn't get his words out. And
Mm-hmm.
finally we just walked him over to the park separately and I got him to take a breath. And I said, were there too many people?
Yeah.
And he said, yes.
Yeah, you knew.
And I said, okay, so in future, if there's too many people, you tell mommy and daddy, when we leave, no questions asked.
Yeah.
But there were days where like we'd be at the bookstore where he wanted to go, and
Yeah.
5 minutes later, he'd be running out the door.
Right.
And it was like, what? And now he can say there's too many people.
Right.
But it's hard to explain to other people, like, no, this is why he's doing this.
Right. And I hear that because what happens is people see it as behavioral. Like you were saying, right? Quote unquote, he's being a bad kid. Like, oh, he's just whining or he's crying for no reason or whatever. But you understand that. And I think that's a big part of parenting a kid with ADHD is being the advocate, right? And, I know it's just starting for you and I don't want to scare you, but, my kids are older. My oldest is in grade 10 and I'm, for some reason, still having to advocate for him, to his teachers around his quote unquote behavior issues, right? And, like he's being chastised for not focusing because his brain is impaired in a way that his focus and concentration is impaired. That's like, if his arm, wasn't like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like if he had a physical disability,
People
and
would actually do something. And
yeah,
that's
people
exactly
would
what it
not,
is. If you
yeah,
can see it, you can treat it. It's no
right.
different than mental health, right?
Yeah,
You can't see that my brain is wired differently. So it doesn't matter what I tell you. You're like, no,
just do it. Yeah,
what do you mean? Just, you can't go a day without sleep. You can't go, you can't have a conversation with someone and then not worry about it, that night or 3 years later.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? And the weird thing with him is like, none of this presents anywhere else. If you ask his teachers, he is the helper. He eats all his snacks. He eats his meals. He sleeps. He's great. He's smart. And it's like, fantastic. So my 3-year-old is gaslighting me because when he comes home,
yes,
and it's that term, and I don't like it, is they feel safe with you. And there's nothing wrong with being safe. I want to be safe. I want him to be himself. I want him to feel comfortable. But I also want that to come home.
yes,
Right?
yes,
Like, it's
yes.
not that you're a bad kid. It's just, if when we said, are you having an issue with the coat and the boots? And his teacher said, no, he does it by himself. I'm like, excuse you?
Right.
What is, they post pictures every day. He'd be wearing his hat, he'd be wearing his gloves, his coat, his snow pants. And I was like, what is this witchcraft? And they
Yes.
were like, he does it himself. And I would come home and be like, okay, put your coat and boots on. Teacher says you can.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. And it's a kicking and screaming match. And it's, some days we'll get dressed with no problems. Other days it's a fighting match. Like,
Yeah.
it's, if they don't see it, they don't think it's a problem.
Right. And I think now looking back, now I can see how my symptoms impact my parenting and how I deal with my kids' symptoms, and two sides, right? Like how it can be a struggle, but also that positive side, like you were talking about, right? Like you understand, oh, the tag on his shirt is why he's upset and he can't sleep. Cut it off. He goes back to bed. He's good, or like being in a big crowd and being able to remove him from the situation, giving him that space. You're able to recognize those things, which is fantastic. The other side of it is like us as a parent with ADHD helping our kids manage. It's, I don't know, it's like a cruel joke sometimes, because the thing that affected me big time was I was reading, about parenting kids with ADHD is like, you have to be their executive functioning. But that's a joke because mine is impaired. So how do I do that?
I never even thought of it that way. And now it's like, oh,
Right.
it is. Oh my gosh.
So it's like, okay, my 15-year-old cannot keep his room clean to save his life. Neither could I at that age. Yeah,
I still can't.
absolutely. Right. And so it's like, I have to now be his executive functioning and step in and be like, okay, this is what you need to do. Pick up the, dirty laundry first, then make your bed, then put the clean laundry away, then wipe down the surfaces. But like, I don't have the patience to sit and do that. So then there's sometimes I'm like, just clean it. But I
Yep.
know he can't just clean it. So
Yep.
how do your symptoms impact you in terms of helping your son with those symptoms that you see? How is that, a
So
struggle or not a struggle?
cleaning is a great example. At school, they will do the pickup song and everything, and we do it at home, and it's nothing.
Right.
Um, and it's so funny. I saw it the one day the teacher was like, "Okay, lights off, hands up, everyone stop talking." It was like watching a military team. Like
Yeah.
they did it, and then I tried it at home, and he just looked at me. I was like, oh, "Okay."
Yeah.
So his big thing is cleaning. If I could show you my living room right now, and I'm getting better at it. It's
Yeah.
But like you said, it's a struggle. Like my bedroom is always a mess. Always has been. Growing up, it was always a fight. And it was like, okay, he wants to pick up a broom, and then he got frustrated. And like he's not actually sweeping, but he would start and he would get really mad and throw it and then run in his room and cry. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So you want to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's standing in your way?
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a friend's house and they have the Melissa and Doug cleaning kit, which is like the kid size
Yeah.
one.
Yep.
And he went nuts for it. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I said, is the broom too big at home?
Right.
And he said, yeah. So for Christmas, Santa brought him a Melissa and Doug cleaning kit. Now, the
Nice.
funniest thing, which I did not expect, was he started cleaning and I instinctively grabbed the broom.
Right.
And my husband goes, are you body doubling our 3-year-old? He said, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Whatever works.
The last thing I was just like, oh, it'll get him to clean up more. It'll give him a little more independence. He won't get so frustrated. And then he grabbed his broom and I was just like, oh. And I like instinctively, I had something else in my head. I was like, he's
Yeah.
going to play with that. I'm going to do the dishes or something. Broom. And like you said, it's one of those things where his room is a mess. It's my responsibility because trying to teach him to clean is not going to happen.
Right. He's 3.
Yeah. But
He's
then
little.
again, yeah. But yesterday, for example, we did a declutter while he wasn't home. We
Mm-hmm.
got rid of 2 garbage bags and a bunch of big stuff. And our house is still a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's that we live here. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it is going to be a mess sometimes.
Yeah.
And you just kind of pick and choose where, his toys are on the floor. Well, he plays in the living room because he doesn't really play in his bedroom.
Right.
I take the steps to make his room more of a playroom.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to associate his room with play because then he's going to struggle with sleep.
Yes. Right.
Right? Because they always say, don't have a TV in your room, only associate your room with sleep. Like all these things where some
Yeah.
people are like, they can go in there for hours by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want that. But then on the flip side, he already doesn't sleep.
Right.
So I need to, that's the functioning, right? Is like,
Yeah.
it's simple to say, well, put them in their room and they'll entertain themselves. But my brain goes, he won't sleep if he thinks his room is the fun place.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just so hard. Like the boots thing and the oh man, I so relate to that because I think I still have nightmares about it because mornings are not my thing, which for a lot of people with ADHD is true, and
Oh
especially
yeah.
when we struggle with sleep and then we have to get up early and, and then we get up late because we don't, we turn our alarm off, et cetera, et cetera.
And half the time
Um,
I can't get myself ready. And now I'm responsible for someone else to get ready and get out the door on time and get him in the car. And the biggest thing is like, if you can get the boots on him, they come off in the car
yeah.
because he's
Right.
sitting like a pretzel in his car seat with his tablet. And
Yeah.
then I get there and it's like, oh my God, now I got to put the boots back on. And that's the thing is half the time we can't regulate in the morning. It's like,
Yes.
do I want to shower today? I don't. Maybe. So I feel like brushing my teeth. And again, that is something that like anybody's just like, it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And
People
for
take
us, it's like, oh my God, I need to like, talk myself into it. It doesn't matter that there's a toothbrush there. It doesn't matter if I put one in every room of the house.
That's right.
It's a big thing. And then you're like, oh, I have to pick out his clothes, fight him to get dressed, make sure he uses the toilet before we go so that he doesn't have an accident because it's a car ride that's 20 minutes. Does he have snacks for the car ride if he's hungry? Is the tablet charged? Like all these different things. And then I run out in yoga pants and a sweater
Right.
and a mom bun, and
Yeah.
he looks fantastic, but we have just had an hour fight about the coat.
Right. Right. And then, if you think of all that you just explained, that is all executive functioning, right? Like organizing, executing a task, figuring out the time that you need to get there, the time you need to get ready, like all of that stuff comes from that prefrontal cortex in our brain where that is impaired for us. And so it feels like so hard. Like oh man, I hate the mornings. And
Yeah.
so
I've never had a morning routine. I have tried. I don't make my bed. I wake up and look at my phone and they're like, you shouldn't do that.
yeah,
That's great. That's how I start my day. I need to turn off my alarm.
yeah,
Make sure there's no emails from my mom or things like that. And then you get up and it's like, how do I want to start my day? It's usually take my meds.
yeah,
But, it's, do I actually want to shower today? Do I want to brush my teeth today? Do I feel like doing makeup? Oh, I have to get the kid out in 10 minutes. I guess I'm not doing any of that.
yeah.
And then I should make a tea. So I stop spending money, but then I don't make the tea. And then I go to Starbucks or
Yes.
Timmy's. And then the guilt is, well, I spent money I shouldn't have because I have it at home.
Yes.
But I have to do it because I'm trying to get the tiny human out the door.
Right. Right. Then you wonder why you're tired at 2 o'clock because that's all the thoughts you've had in the span of like 30 seconds.
Yes.
Never mind actually in the whole span of a morning and a day. It's exhausting having a brain that runs this fast, right? It really is. And then we have to use skills that we A, don't have, or B, we're working on, or C, like we can do them, but it's a lot of work to get there. And so that is, again, it's really hard that we have to be like the person with the executive functioning and, all the things for these tiny humans that it's like a thing we're not good at. Right.
And
So it's really
no
hard.
one's being our executive function. No one's
Exactly.
dressing us. Nobody's like it's that thing of
Exactly.
like if you could go to sleep. Like kids don't get it. Like I have a girlfriend and both our kids don't sleep and we're constantly like messaging each other at night. And it's like, I don't
Yeah.
understand why they don't love it. Sleep is magical
Yes.
when you can get it. When you are older, it is that joke, right? Like we're gonna wake you up at 5 a.m. when you're a teenager and see how
Yeah.
you like it.
Exactly. Exactly. And my husband and I always say, like, if someone were to say to us, like, go take a nap, okay,
Right?
no problem. I'm
Or
ready.
if someone says, can I dress you for the day?
Yes.
And you get to watch TV while I do it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Instead of like running down the hall naked and
Yeah.
screaming and locking himself in his room. Like
Yes.
they have it so easy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
I know. I hear you.
nobody is doing these things for us. And now
No.
we're trying to do them for ourselves and
Yeah.
another human and get out the door without
Yeah.
the guilt
Yeah.
and just try and get through the day and then pick up said tiny human, bring them home, have the fight to take things off. and then have the fight about dinner because half the time he doesn't want to eat.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest thing right now is figuring out tricks to get him to eat things. If he only eats a waffle, I don't care as long as he eats it.
Right. Right.
Because I understand safe foods. I am a huge picky eater, always have been. And they told
Same.
my mom I'd outgrow it. I
Nope.
didn't. I
Me neither.
still won't eat fruits or vegetables. Textures,
Yeah.
right? It's textures.
Yep. Absolutely. And I hear that. And I was called a picky eater my whole life. I took that on. I was like, yeah, I'm a picky eater. And now I understand myself, and I understand that it's not because I'm like, I don't know, like, it's not because I'm picky, but it's that I genuinely like cannot deal with certain flavors. I genuinely cannot deal with certain textures. Like, I cannot do it. And during pregnancy was interesting. Like, I would easily go off things like eggs or banana or yogurt. Oh God, just the thought of it now.
Yeah.
Oh man, it made me so sick. It was,
Nobody understood it growing up. My mom was just like, "You're a picky eater,"
yeah,
and it was
just eat
for
it.
me. It's the gag reflex. Like
Yeah.
I would try and have a piece of lettuce. Like we'd be at a restaurant, so I'd be like, "I don't understand why you can't eat salad," and I'm like, "Watch this." Put a piece of lettuce in my mouth, and I start gagging to the point where my eyes are like watering. Like
Yeah.
I almost need the Heimlich. Like it's so bad. You
Yeah.
want to talk about bananas? We don't have them in this house.
Right.
My husband loves them.
Yeah.
I cannot have bananas in my house because the smell. Literally,
Yeah.
just the smell.
Yeah.
And then they get rotten and then it gets worse. I can't be in a room if you have a banana. It's those like certain fruit smells I can't deal with. There's a couple vegetables, so I blow people's mind when I'm like, I'll eat mushrooms, I'll eat green olives, but notice the textures are similar. I
Interesting.
can't do
Yeah.
broccoli. Broccoli's a tree. Can't do
Right.
raw carrots, which is interesting because crunchy should be something. Again, there's that should
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
isn't really a texture,
Right.
but it
But it's,
is depending how you cook it
yep.
and
Absolutely.
prepare it.
Yep. Absolutely.
So the other thing I'm struggling with now is trying to break those habits out of him, but also
Mm,
trying to explain to people that it's not necessarily a habit that can be broken,
right. Right. And
right?
he's not doing it, and you aren't either. I'm not either, to be defiant or
Exactly.
to be picky. I'm like, I wish I ate more variety of food. I wish. So, Lorraine, I'm wondering if you could share what you feel are some advantages or strengths of being a parent with neurodiversity.
I think we do talk a lot about the struggles because that's where we all feel that we can kind of come together and agree on, even though our journeys are very different. A lot of the struggles feel the same, especially in parenting.
Mhm.
I asked my husband this question one time, and his answer was from an outsider's perspective, and he is as neurotypical as they come.
Right.
It looks like you're parenting on hard mode. It looks like you're going through life on hard mode.
Yeah.
And he's right. It is at times really difficult to be in this brain, in this body, in these actions and these emotions and what we're doing. And I actually kind of turned it around. And although we don't have a walkthrough because very rarely can we find answers,
Yeah.
I feel like the community for neurodiversity
Mhm.
is like a forum when you're playing a game, and you can go on there and you can ask for tips and tricks and secret codes, and
Yeah.
we're always learning from each other. And I think although there are moments where we feel completely alone,
Mhm.
it's as simple as, turning on social media or TV. Like there's so much representation. There are so many different resources now.
Mhm.
You don't need to be an influencer to tell your story. I'm certainly not,
Me
but I'm
neither.
at a point where I'm comfortable doing that, and I'm comfortable helping others, even if it's just having a tea and listening. It's the community that is the biggest benefit, I think. And that is at the end of the day, what gets you through, and it gets me through is
Yeah.
when I can talk to myself or others like you when we come
Mhm.
together and it's like, oh my gosh, kids are doing XYZ and what works for you and what doesn't. And just learning from each other is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the normalizing too, because so long before even I got my diagnosis or realizing that I had ADHD, but really that isolation piece where I'm like, why do I do this? Or why do I parent in this way? am I the only one? Like, is this normal? I feel like I'm not normal. And then connecting with other parents who, have similar struggles, and, obviously that validation piece, right? Of like, oh yeah, I do that too. Or like, oh yeah, playing with my kid is really hard for me too. I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you, which is super helpful. And I think too that sharing, like you said, the tips and tricks, like we also have this ability to think outside the box and like parent in creative ways that maybe other people don't think about. And that can be helpful of getting those tips and tricks definitely from other people in the community for sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that. What is something that you would want? So, kind of a twofold question that you would want other parents living with neurodiversity to maybe know or like think about or understand. And then from that piece, like, what would you want parents who are neurotypical to maybe understand about parents like us who are neurodiverse?
Okay. First one,
Yes.
neurodivergent parents.
Yeah.
There is no wrong answer to your parenting.
Mm-hmm.
If your child is happy and healthy and thriving, you are doing a great job.
Yeah.
I watched the Bluey episode Baby Race. It makes me cry every time. And Chili feels like she is failing around the clock. And one of the seasoned moms comes in and just says, "You're doing great."
Mm.
And you are, because you're doing what's best for your child. I have those days. And then look at my son and he says something that blows me away. And I'm like, well, he only learned that from me.
Yes.
So even when you're having those moments, don't judge yourself. Everyone's judging you. We judge each other way too much. So at least be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
We don't traditionally sit down and have dinner because we don't have a dinner table. My kid will get up and eat and walk around. And if it works for him and he's eating,
Yes.
keep your comments to yourself.
Yep.
But if we go somewhere else and he sits at a table, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Do what works for you and what works for your family.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Neurotypicals, like my husband.
Yes.
He came into this relationship barely understanding any neurodivergency. He came from a neurotypical family, neurotypical background. He's a nerd, but that's different. He has his own hyperfixations, Warhammer, and role-playing games.
Right.
But over the years we've been together, he has constantly tried to learn and understand. Right. And really, you can't do that through a textbook. Myself, it was depression, anxiety. He learned how to deal with those. Postpartum, we figured that one out together. Then it was borderline personality disorder. And that was learning. It's all about learning together. And if it's not your partner who's neurodivergent and other parents, just ask them what they need. Ask them how you can help, because looking it up in a textbook is one example. Mm-hmm. And some of these examples can be really scary and really hurtful and create these negative stigmas around individuals who are trying their best. Yeah. We're all just figuring out what works for us. And all we want is for you to ask, what do you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like for you, what impact does that have on you when your husband like takes an interest, so to speak, and is invested in learning about what you're dealing with?
It's a huge validation. Yeah. It normalizes what I'm going through. Yeah. But he has seen me through my bad days. He's seen me through my good days. And when he doesn't understand something, especially with our son right now, because he does show those tendencies that I pick up on and he doesn't, he has said, you're going to have to point them out.
Right.
And I don't sit there and go, well, you're not doing your due diligence. Right. You're not doing the research. I go, okay, now I have to be aware that I need to help him understand because he wants to. And I think that's the thing is, at the end of the day, we all want to understand each other, but we're too busy trying to solve everybody's issues the way we want it solved. We're not asking. We're not trying to learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with neurodivergence, it is different in every single person. So yes, like we can learn from the textbook just in terms of definitions or, what does it mean or what symptoms could possibly show up. But then from that person directly learning, well, and how does it show up for you in your day to day? It's going to show up differently for you than it does for me. Right.
Exactly.
So I think that's so helpful. And like you said, validating, like it's just so lovely that he's, so supportive in that sense. And, and I've heard of people saying, well, it's not my issue. Like, so I'm not going to learn about it. Right. Cause it doesn't, I'm not the one that has it. But if it's your partner or someone close to you that you love or your child, right, I think it just helps for them, like for you to understand that they don't feel as alienated and like there's something wrong with me or like I'm so different when you're like, trying to understand and trying to normalize. Yeah.
And I think when somebody gives you that validation, at least for myself, like when he gives me that validation, and I've been in relationships over the years and I struggled, personal relationships, interpersonal, things like that. Something as simple as I'm going to go take a nap because I'm burnt out, emotionally, socially, whichever it is. And I don't care who laughs at this. He comes and he texts me in every time. Texts me in, he says, have a great nap, and he closes the door. Oh. There is no guilt. There is no questioning. He doesn't make me set a timer, and he holds down the fort, and we will take turns. I know when he's going to hit his wall. Yeah. But it's just, if I don't feel the guilt and the judgment from him, I am less likely to do it to myself.
Yeah.
Because if somebody understands what I need, why can't I?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lorraine, and for sharing your story. And can people find you online or on social media?
Yeah, currently I am building an Instagram. It is a side of alphabet soup. I know that's a mouthful, but so is everything going on in my head. Yep. So thank you so much for having me, Christine. Always love chatting with you. It's fantastic.
No problem. Thank you so much. And I will definitely link your Instagram account, which of course I follow, in the show notes so that people can link to you online as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports or go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, podcast episodes, and ways to connect with us. Check out our new episode every other Monday.